And 2 days later, went in for that ultrasound and they found it. And it was not my uterus. Hey guys, it's Maggie and I am back today. If you're new to my channel, I am a former GI nurse and also patient advocate who has shared her experience living with Crohn's disease and a permanent ostomy bag. I've been sharing for a long time, but today's video is specifically going to talk about the infertility to ectopic pregnancy to natural pregnancy. That has been the journey for us for the last 4 years, and it's been a wild ride. The reason I'm doing this in one video, I know that I've shared pretty extensively about the ectopic pregnancy experience in a number of different vlogs, but the information kind of gets all mixed up between them, and it can be a lot to watch through when you're just looking for answers and for somebody to commiserate with. The reason I'm doing this video where we talk about the whole story in one go is because I've recently gotten a few comments on a few of the different ectopic pregnancy videos. Very specific questions about what were your HCG levels? When did you get a regular period back? How long did it take for you to get pregnant afterwards? And my guess is those are probably from people currently experiencing an ectopic. And, you know, I've dealt with a lot medically since the age of 11 years old. That's when I was diagnosed with Crohn's, had a lot of surgeries and stuff. And the ectopic pregnancy that I had last year was one of the hardest things that I've ever experienced. I mean, mentally it was awful, but also physically because of the way it had to be resolved. So I'm gonna go through this experience. I'm hoping that this will be a helpful video. I fear it may not be for everybody. I know that when I was told, I was getting positive pregnancy tests and I was told this could be ectopic, the last thing I wanted to see online was people going through it, because I couldn't understand that after all of this work and all the effort we put in for this very wanted pregnancy that this wasn't it. This was not our baby. And I didn't want to hear it from anybody, even though that's what wound up happening. My hope is that this gives somebody a little bit of hope or encouragement if you're in that situation now, that you know that maybe down the road things will be different. Obviously, it's not a guarantee. What I'm being pregnant right now is not expected. Definitely not expected, but we'll talk about it. So I think it's really important to start off that we did go through infertility. My husband and I got married in October of 2020, and right around that time is when we seriously started trying to have a baby. And that involved me learning all about my cycle and stuff, and getting all the ovulation strips and tracking that. Super fun. And I knew that for myself it would be likely that I'd have issues just because I have a complicated surgical history. I've had more than just the ostomy done. An ostomy is just a way for you to divert away from your lower GI system. They bring a little piece of your intestine through your abdominal wall. I wear an adhesive bag, and that's how I go to the bathroom. People all the time, though, go on to have healthy pregnancies with this. I just knew that it could potentially complicate things. Every time you have surgery, scar tissue can build. That can impact the fallopian tubes, which are really important for getting pregnant. So yeah, I knew in the back of my mind that there could be some problems, but was hopeful that, hey, maybe things would work out for once. So we tried, and we tried, and we tried. Time zooms by. 3 years later, we're finally like, okay, what the heck is going on? So we went to seek help from a fertility clinic and got a bunch of different testing done. All of the testing for both myself and my husband came back normal, which I was shocked. I had the HSG test and my tubes were open on that, you know, the dye went right through. So I was very confused about what was happening. I had regular periods and stuff. We didn't know. It was just unexplained infertility. So we decided to move forward with our first round of fertility treatment, which was intrauterine insemination, or for short, IUI. I basically took a medication called Clomid, which makes you ovulate, makes you grow eggs or follicles. And then I took another medication called Ovidrel. It's an injection, which made me release that egg from the follicle. Then my husband provided sperm, and we went to the clinic on the day that we thought was likely I'd be releasing that egg. They washed his sperm, that's what they call it, I guess, getting rid of the guys that don't work as well, are not great swimmers. And then they took a catheter, opened up my cervix, passed the catheter through, injected the sperm, and basically keep your fingers crossed for the next 2 weeks and hope that something happens. That was our first fertility treatment, our only fertility treatment we've ever been through, and that happened around 3.5 years in. It took us a while from testing to fertility treatment. We wanted to make sure we had all our ducks in a row and were prepared. So we did that, and shockingly, 2 weeks later, I started to get faint positives, and I was totally mind blown. I thought, you know, it's supposed to be, I think my doctor said a 14% chance that an IUI would work each time you try it. We were already, you know, in my mind, I'm like, okay, we got to prep for the next IUI because clearly this isn't going to work. But then it did. I found out I was pregnant, and then I went in for the blood work. They confirmed I was pregnant, but the HCG level was extremely low. It was at 20. Generally, by that time in my cycle, I think I was 15 days past ovulation, DPO. They expect to see at least 100, and it wasn't there, it was 20. So they kept bringing me back in every other day for blood work to see if my HCG was doubling. And at first it wasn't quite doubling, it was close, which in some cases is okay from my understanding. It was close, but it wasn't doubling. But then after a little bit, it finally started doubling regularly. It just seemed like I was behind where I should have been. So they kept telling me, you know, this is not what we would expect to see for your HCG, so we do believe that you're gonna have a chemical pregnancy, you're going to lose this, or it might be ectopic. And last spring was awful. This all happened last spring. I had the IUI, I think February 22nd, around that date. Found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later into March, and went on for a few weeks of this, basically just waiting for me to get far enough along to where they could search for the embryo, see where it was. And so around 6 weeks, I think exactly on the dot of 6 weeks, I had my first transvaginal ultrasound, and they couldn't find anything. There was this suspicious spot in my uterus, which I don't know what the heck it was, but it was not the little baby. That gave me a little bit of hope, like maybe it's just not far enough developed yet and we can't really get a good look at it. But they said, no, we'll bring you back in 2 days and see if we can find it. And 2 days later, went in for that ultrasound and they found it. And it was not my uterus. And that was the most devastating day. It's still like, we're in January now, it still breaks me. It was awful. It was the worst experience. I mean, I can't even describe it. I don't know how I got home safely because Zach was getting ready for work. This was like a really early appointment. He was getting ready to go to work, so he didn't come with me. And I was bawling. Like, I didn't know what to do. So obviously, once they discovered that, they sent it to their team of doctors. I'm really grateful that all of this happened with a fertility clinic. I keep looking back at this because normally if you just have a natural pregnancy, you're not involved with a fertility clinic, you are not being monitored like they will do. You know, an OB just says, okay, we'll see you between 8 and 12 weeks gestation for your first ultrasound. I would have ruptured by then. Like it would have been so much worse. My fertility clinic was great. They so closely monitored me. I wish that every doctor's office could give the individualized care that my clinic did. So they were just the kindest people. They were so nice to me. They were so nice to me. And immediately they had to plan for how we're going to treat the ectopic after all of their team of doctors confirmed and they agreed that yes, this is not a viable pregnancy. So they said, we're gonna bring you in tomorrow. They actually wanted to get me in that day, but since Zach was going to work, I didn't have the car. I was like, I can't come back. We planned for the next day to do methotrexate. And this was an injection in my butt. It was actually 2 injections. I do believe it's weight-based. Honestly, I don't remember. I think it's weight-based. So based on the volume that they need for you, it might have to go into 2 different injections, which is what we found. To be honest, like it was an uncomfortable injection on both butt cheeks. It's like your upper butt that they do it. It's an intramuscular injection. It's not pleasant and it's sore after, but it was okay. It was more just feeling like I got hit by a truck after that. Methotrexate is actually a medication they use with my Crohn's disease. I haven't taken it for Crohn's, but other people have. It's a rough medication, and I hope that I will never need it for my disease. So we did that the next day, and they had to keep monitoring my HCG levels. I was getting blood work every other day. It was basically Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I was going in for blood work just to see what my levels were doing. And my levels did continue to rise. So they brought me back in again for a second round of methotrexate that also did not work. And my levels kept rising. And actually, when they started to do the transvaginal ultrasounds, they were still continuing this because they wanted to see what was going on, what they could see, if they could see blood or anything. And they found a heartbeat, and that was devastating. It was not by any means normal, and it would not have survived. But there was a heartbeat, and that was devastating to see. Because, you know, they've got the big screen in front of you as they're doing these ultrasounds. So that was rough. And it seemed like the fertility clinic had a much more sensitive ultrasound machine than the hospital, which is where I would eventually wind up a couple of times. So after, you know, they saw the heartbeat, even after 2 rounds, 4 total methotrexate injections, they said, you are likely going to need surgery, sent me to the hospital. I share all of this in vlogs, so I'll make sure that they're down below in the description, but went to the hospital, my HCG, it was so annoying. Between the fertility clinic and the hospital, their labs, like, they use different labs, so it's not surprising to me that the numbers were going to be different, but they were so vastly different from each other. I don't remember the exact numbers, but essentially, at the hospital, we went, you know, afternoon, evening time. They did the blood work, checked the HCG, got the level. They said, we think we can wait until morning for surgery. We'll recheck your HCG in the morning and see what's going on. They rechecked it in the morning and it was much lower. So they thought, okay, we caught her when she plateaued and started going down. Like the methotrexate finally started working. And I was discharged, which was, that was tough. It was a rough night in the hospital because I couldn't eat or drink anything. They were doing that so that way if I did have to have surgery, I would be all ready. They put me on IV fluids, but definitely not enough. Like as somebody with an ostomy, I need a bit more fluids than the average person just because I lose a lot of fluids through my ostomy bag. So I was not feeling good by the next morning. I'm actually glad the surgery didn't happen that day because I felt like I was much more prepared for when surgery actually did happen. So kept going back to the fertility clinic. They kept checking my levels. My levels actually did start to go down within their lab as well. So that was really encouraging. And I believe it was on a Monday. It was the Monday after this whole experience. Maybe 4 or 5 days after the first hospital visit, I started to bleed. And I thought, this is my period. This is my period starting because the levels are going down. My levels were still high, like thousands, but my period did start. And when I say it started, I I was bleeding. In my mind, I was thinking, well, you're miscarrying, and they always say if that happens to you, your period might be heavier and more uncomfortable. So, you know, I didn't think anything was wrong. It definitely did seem to be my period, because if you've ever heard of a decidual cast, be careful Googling it. That's exactly what happened. I lost a lot of uterine tissue at once, so I knew that was likely my uterus lining coming out. And, you know, I talked to the doctor about it, and they're like, yep. So thankfully I was aware of it before it happened. But I had that happen, and I wasn't really experiencing a lot of pain. I kept being asked, are you experiencing one-sided pain at all? Like, do you feel pain on your right side? And I kept saying, no, I don't feel anything really. And then when my period started, I had my normal cramps. Maybe the cramps were a little more intense, but nothing was one-sided. And I wasn't having shoulder pain like they tell you about, like the referred pain. Wasn't having any of that. So I'm like, it's obviously my period. It's just rougher. And then I remember that Wednesday, obviously brought back in for more blood work and another transvaginal ultrasound to see if they could find the embryo again. And they did, and there was still a heartbeat. And I was bleeding a lot that morning. My periods are a little weird because I no longer have a colon or a rectum, so my pelvic floor is a little bit different. And so when I have periods, it tends to come out all at once and then kind of pause for a little bit and then comes all out at once again. It pools basically. And it was not doing that that day. I was having a flow, which was kind of unusual for me, but again, just thought it was a heavy period. I was bleeding a lot though. I changed my pad before I left the house, drove the 25 minutes to the clinic, had to immediately run into their bathroom and change my pad again. I think I was wearing a tampon too, but obviously took that out for the ultrasound. Had the new pad, was like, all right, I'll be good. Like, I shouldn't have too much bleeding in the time of me sitting in the waiting room waiting to get the ultrasound. I was there maybe 5 minutes, and they brought me back and they did the ultrasound, and a gush of blood came out on the table when they pulled the wand out. And they looked concerned, but when I was, I drove myself there, I was fine. I was like, I'm not, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm not in severe pain or anything. And I was like, you can see I'm having my period, like bleeding a lot. I bled all over their floor. I had to clean that up. It was like, looking back, I now know that it was too much. Anyways, so they were still really concerned, and they were like, hey, we want to do another round of methotrexate because we don't think this is happening fast enough. And I pushed against the third dose of methotrexate. It's not often done. It also made me feel absolutely terrible. And at this point I started to wonder, I was like, I am bleeding a lot, and like this little embryo still has a heartbeat, and it just doesn't seem to be progressing the way people think that it should. I feel like I don't want to take more methotrexate, feel more sick, and then wind up getting surgery anyway and being worse off, a bit worse off than I was. So went home that day, and I was doing stuff around the house, and I wasn't even thinking, and this is probably my fault, but it was gonna happen anyway. I was told to be very careful. Like, don't do anything wild or crazy, which I wasn't. I was avoiding everything. I didn't want to move around too much. I was just resting because that's really all I felt like doing. We got this big storm that came through. Our trash cans were up at the street, and they were blowing down the street. So I thought, okay, I got to run out there and just bring them down. They were empty. They were light, but I brought them down to the house, and then I came inside. And within half an hour, I started to notice, oh my God, what the heck is going on? I feel like I'm having the worst gas pains of my life, which I don't really get anymore, because with an ostomy, there's not much blocking things. Like, if gas is going to comes out my bag pretty easily. So I knew something was up. I went into the bathroom, and thank God I brought my phone, because I was like, oh no, I'm starting to feel lightheaded and like I'm gonna pass out, and I think maybe I ruptured. I was so worried that I was actually just experiencing gas pain. I was totally being over dramatic about it. I was not. And so I started to get wobbly on the toilet, and I thought, oh my God, if I pass out and die on the toilet, I can't do that. We have to make it out of here. So I texted my husband and I said, hey, I'm giving you an FYI. I suddenly don't feel good. I think I may have ruptured, and yeah, I'm gonna try to make it out of the bathroom. I couldn't walk at that point. I had to crawl out of the bathroom because it was too painful to sit straight up. And this is not the first time that I felt something like this. It felt very similar to peritonitis, which I experienced years and years ago. It's actually why I wound up with my ostomy bag. It was so painful. And so I wound up calling my husband, and Zach was freaking out. He was like, okay, I'm telling my boss that I'm gonna come home. He works like 35, 40 minutes away, so he zoomed home. I did what I could to pack a bag, you know, got my charger. I was crawling around the house trying to do this. I think I crawled up the stairs and like had to crawl downwards back down the stairs. And long story short, he got home, raced me to the ER, got another transvaginal ultrasound, and they said, yeah, if we're comparing to last week's ultrasound when you were last here, you have a lot of free fluid, which is likely blood. So there was a little bit of back and forth about getting a colorectal surgeon involved. Can I wait till morning? Because it was evening time by the time we got settled in, and they said no, she can't wait. So I was rushed in the OR, and that was awful. I really liked the idea of having the tissue reabsorb into me. Rather than losing a tube with the embryo in it. I just felt like that was ripping this very wanted baby away from me. But I lost my right fallopian tube, and that was just, you know, after 3.5 years of trying to have a baby, I did one round of fertility treatment, and now I ruined my fertility more. Like I lost a tube that there's no way I'm gonna get pregnant on my own, let alone other ways. Like IVF is probably the only way I can go now. I was so upset. Very mild word to use. It still obviously like affects me. It's very sad to me that that's how everything worked out. But you know, they got in there, they got rid of the tube. I now have a lovely big scar because they wanted to do the surgery open due to scar tissue potential. So I've got what looks like a little C-section scar. But they did it successfully, and I healed well. And from there, you know, I had the surgery on April 3rd. So from February 22nd, when I had the IUI, to April 3rd. April 3rd was 8 weeks pregnant, technically. So, you know, I bled for a little bit after that, but it did go down, and my fertility clinic thankfully followed me very closely. They were like, yeah, we want to make sure that your HCG is definitely going down. And that went on for weeks. I still had to go back pretty frequently for blood work to make sure that my levels got down to 0. They wanted to see less than 5. And it took a very long time. The highest my HCG was 11,000 during that whole experience. So it took a long time to finally get down. I know some people with ectopics, like I watched videos after this experience where people's levels were so much lower than mine. I'm like, how the heck did this continue for so long? Like, I don't understand. With the medications they tried, wild. So that bleeding that I had during the emergency surgery and, you know, a couple days before, that did seem to be a period, but also bleeding from my fallopian tube. And so that kind of settled out after surgery and was tracked down to 0 for the HCG. And I just went to my post-op follow-up appointment, and I continued on with life. And I told my fertility clinic, like, hey, I'm gonna need some time because didn't expect this. I really did not. This was not the way I thought things would go. Not by any means. I just thought I wasn't going to get pregnant at all. So Zach and I took the summer to just be us. I don't know. We went to the beach a lot, and I did a lot of gardening and stuff. Just tried to move forward after all that fun stuff, and physically heal too, because that incision, man, that hurts. I don't know how people have C-sections and then go home with no medication. Very painful, very painful. So towards the end of the summer, we started talking to the fertility clinic again, because we felt like, okay, let's see what our options are. And it was decided that IVF would be the likely or safest way for us to go, which is in vitro fertilization. I take a lot of medications to produce a lot of follicles with a lot of eggs. They take them out of me during a procedure. They inseminate the eggs with my husband's sperm. Hopefully we grow embryos, and then we were gonna do a frozen embryo transfer. So that's what we started to work on. Like, I got pricing for everything. I think the meds after insurance, because my insurance was covering a decent amount of this whole thing. I still had to pay $10,000 out of pocket. Had the prescription at the pharmacy, was just like waiting to order them. We had stuff going on that fall. We were really busy, and we're like, we'll hold off until we thought like October we would probably start the process. So in our minds, we were gonna do October for doing the egg retrieval stuff. So taking the medications, you have to go through a whole cycle and take those medications, get the eggs, and then the next cycle, as long as conditions are good, you can do a transfer. So we thought November would likely be the time for a transfer. So we were preparing for all of that. We weren't really trying over the summer, but I was tracking my ovulation after the ectopic for a couple of months, and I was looking at my periods and stuff. My periods did take a little bit to come back normally, and actually I'm gonna look at my phone to tell you date-wise what happened, because I still have my app here with my periods. Now it's saying question marks, like, what's going on? You haven't had a period in a while. I wonder why. Okay, so April 1st was when I got my period. April 3rd is when I had the emergency surgery. Finished that period out by April 6th. And so went on, and through May, I got my period again May 6th. It wound up being a 35-day cycle based on that, which is longer than my typical. Typically, I have a 28 to 29-day cycle. So it was a little bit late, like a week late. And then let's see if we move on. I had some spotting every now and then randomly, but then in June, I got my period on June 8th. So that was a 33-day cycle. And then again, I got my period on July 5th. So that was a 27-day cycle. So it was a little wonky. Something I noticed though was that they were a little bit lighter after this. And in tracking ovulation, I started to notice that I was getting my peak ovulation strips earlier in my cycle. So I was typically not ovulating until like day 19, day 20, which typically they say on average, you know, everybody's different, but on average it's supposed to be around day 14. So I was definitely ovulating later. With fertility treatment, that's kind of all manipulated, so they weren't worried about it when it came to that. But I did notice I was ovulating earlier, and my periods were a little bit lighter. Not like crazy, but definitely different. Towards the end of summer, you know, we had this conversation with the fertility clinic, I think in July. And so I wasn't even tracking in August, because we were coming to terms with IVF. Zach was on board. I was trying to get on board. He was much more like supportive. He's like, yep, if this is the safest way for you, that's what I want to do. I don't want to try another IUI. Like, let's do what the doctor says. And I agreed with my doctor. I do think IVF was the safest way to go. But sometimes nature just likes to screw with you. I don't know. So in August, towards the end of August, I had this weird inkling one day, you should like take a test. Nothing was telling me to take a pregnancy test. It was super early. I think it was 7 days past ovulation or 8. I hadn't tracked, so I wasn't really sure, to be honest with you. And I remember I took a cheap Pregmate. I went upstairs, took a shower after taking this Pregmate, and I just put it on the back of the toilet. And I was showering, you know, totally forgot about it. And then I remembered at the end of my shower, oh my God, look at your test. And I looked at it, and it was, it was positive. So faint that I thought, oh, you know what, this is probably one of those indent lines. But the more I looked at it, I was like, that's got color to it. That's not an indent. So I tested for a few more days, and they were actually all negative. So I thought, it's a fluke or it was a chemical pregnancy. I have no idea. And then about 3 or 4 days later, I tested again, middle of the afternoon, and there was a positive. We weren't trying. Didn't know when I ovulated. But somehow, some way, things worked out. And I only have one fallopian tube. And I learned that just because you have one fallopian tube does not mean that your fertility is cut exactly in half. That sometimes the egg can flip-flop sides. And the reason I know that is because with the ectopic pregnancy, I ovulated from my left ovary, and my ectopic pregnancy was in my right fallopian tube. So it switched sides. I don't know what happened there, but yes, you are not immediately cut in half fertility-wise just because you have one fallopian tube. And it's absolutely possible to have a pregnancy with one tube, as I'm now learning, because I am very close to 24 weeks pregnant. And that was a whole experience in itself. Thank goodness my fertility clinic saw me, because I went to them like, I'm terrified, I have a test and it's positive, what do I do? They very gratefully saw me anyway, even though they didn't really have too much to do with the pregnancy. They monitored me very early on, because your risk of ectopic does go up after you've had one. And I like couldn't believe when we found out that this was not an ectopic pregnancy. This was in the right spot in my uterus, and we now know it's a little girl. I'm just like still. It's wild, because you're sitting there, you lose a tube, you know, maybe or maybe not you've experienced infertility at all. You're thinking, that's it. That's it for me. Like IVF or nothing. And then this happens. And I know that it's, you know, it happens differently for everybody. Everybody's body is a little bit different. But I know that people are absolutely, like, their hopes are to zero. They are non-existent after that kind of journey, that kind of experience. And so that's why I wanted to talk about all of this. Lost my fallopian tube beginning of April. Found out I was pregnant the end of August. So that is not a very long time period. What is that? April, May, June, July, August. 5 months. 5 months later. I really, you know, they say you're more fertile after you lose, or after you give birth, but also even if you have a miscarriage of some sort. And I definitely, because I noticed differences in my cycle and the time period of when I was ovulating, I 100% believe that ectopic pregnancy, even though yes, it made me lose a tube and that impacts your fertility a little bit, I don't think I'd be pregnant today without that happening. I think that it really did teach my body what it was supposed to be doing. And, you know, you might be watching this and you might not have any issues with fertility at all. You may have experienced an ectopic after a natural pregnancy, but I just want to give the little story, the little bit of hope that it's absolutely possible to get pregnant after an ectopic, after losing a tube. And, you know, I had family ask me about what was going on, and I told them that I experienced an ectopic, and I was shocked. I was so shocked when 2 of my aunts came back and told me that they had experienced ectopic pregnancies. Another one said she had miscarriages. I'm like, I wish I had known in the moment. Like, I felt like the only person on earth that had this. But I found out, you know, other people in my family, more than one person in my family has experienced this. And one of my aunts that did went on to have more babies afterwards. So yeah, it is possible to naturally get pregnant with only one tube. Only one. I still am sitting here like, are you sure you're in there? But, you know, I felt her kicking this morning, so I'm pretty sure. I think the like 50-something ultrasound pictures I have on my fridge too have confirmed it. But it is such a blessing, such a miracle that I did not, like, I 100% could not even imagine in April that I would be sitting here in January over halfway through a pregnancy. No way, no way. I will forever remember that little embryo. The ultrasound images in my mind, they're burned there. They're permanent. That little baby had everything gone right and things got into the right spot. They would have been due middle of November, so that baby would have been here. And I think about that a lot. But then I think this little baby wouldn't be here without that one. So that brings me a lot of peace. It really does. Again, I don't know if this video is gonna give somebody hope or what. I truly don't. I don't think I have any advice for you other than it does get easier over time. Like a lot of emotional wounds, time does it heal you, or do you just, it gets easier to live with? You don't move on. You don't move on. You remember it forever, but you adapt to the new uncomfortableness that was the experience. I don't know. Does any of that make sense? Probably not, but that's just what I've, you know, that's what I have come to know. It still upsets me. I'm still upset about it, but I'm grateful every single day that it happened because now this little girl is growing in my belly. And I hope that if you have experienced ectopic and you're sitting there hoping for a baby soon, that little baby comes your way. It feels so hopeless after it, but it isn't always necessarily that way. If you have any questions, please ask them below. I try to answer the ones on my other videos about specifics like HCG levels and when I got my period and all that fun stuff. And I know this was an overview, I think, with the HCG levels. I actually got that question a few times. I don't think it's so much what the actual numbers were, but how they are rising or falling against each other. So I know that I'm like shocked that I got to 11,000, but I think in the scale of things, the most important thing to look at is, do you have that decline afterwards? And really, how quickly does that happen? And what, you know, symptoms you're experiencing. And man, it really teaches you to pay attention to your body. And now I feel like I have even more knowledge about how my body works and what is a red flag and what's not a red flag. I'll tell you what, I'm glad it's not last spring. I'm glad we're here today. I feel very fortunate. I will continue to feel very fortunate and just thank my lucky stars that we're here. And I hope that you're doing all right if this is the road you're on, because it sucks. It really does. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you are looking for a way to help support my channel, consider liking this video or even subscribing. You can also check out my store at LetsTalkIBD.shop. I have stickers and hoodies like these guys over here, just related to chronic illness and inflammatory bowel disease, something fun. And I also have a coupon code for my YouTube watchers. You could also become a member of my channel like the wonderful people scrolling on screen here. They've become a member and they have access to videos a little bit earlier. It's a great way to support my channel, and really, just watching my videos means the world. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next.